Last year, a number of times, my wife and I faced some really critical times where people have come to us and asked us to pray for them. And there were different times even in our own lives where we said, God, this seems impossible. And it was in those times that we would open up what we did a year ago. We made our own God can. Maybe you guys have done that. Maybe there's one at your house. I've talked to different people. A year ago, we challenged you to make a God can, and we had these paint cans up front, and Audrey made hers special K. And we put these cool things in here, and we say, God, this seems impossible. We need that. And maybe if you haven't made one, we actually printed off some of these. You can make your own little God can if you want to, or they're up here for you if you want. It's just a reminder through this series that we have this motto, and the motto is that when we face the impossible, we don't give up, we don't quit, we don't say it can't happen. We say God can. And when we put something in there, we say, I wonder if God can handle this. In fact, Nick shared it last week. He flipped the words. He said, can God really help us? And through this series, instead of just saying this is the God Can series, well, we flipped the words, and the titles of these messages are all about the questions that we have. Can God help us? Today I want to talk to you about, can God help you find success after failure? Can God help you find success out of failure? I don't know whether you are like me, but I'm one of those guys that have failed more than he should have. Maybe you guys are all successful, never had a failure. Well, it's going to come at some point in your life. And the question is, can God help you after failure? I was just thinking about to myself, you know, Father's Day is coming up pretty quick, and every time I come to Father's Day, man, there's nothing that makes me feel more like a failure than when I think back about me being a father. I know when my kids were young, I wasn't around for them. And I know at a season in our marriage and in our family life, I would answer everyone else's phone call, but not my kids. I was not there. There was a time when I readjusted my life, and my kids would say, it was during that time that for the first time, Dad, you've been around a little bit. Man, I feel like a failure as a dad. Or even the moment when you stand and you commit your life, you're at the wedding and you say to this woman, and you know, most guys are like hunting and they finally bag their game and they go, okay, now it's all over, you know. And so now you're married, you're committed and all this, and you go on with life, and as a husband, you kind of quit trying. And who would know, I didn't know this as a young married guy, that yelling at your wife was not a good idea. I was kind of a failure as a husband. And then there's this whole thing. I've been 44 years trying to be a pastor, which is just a series of failures. I remember 29 years ago, we had this Christmas Eve service that we had planned, and there was a movie out that was really popular, Mrs. Doubtfire, and we had this crazy idea that we dress this guy up as the innkeeper's wife and do it in drag, the whole thing, and I did the sermon with this guy. It was terrible, horrible. We had all of these guests who had came. I didn't want to go to the door and see or talk to anybody. And the reason I didn't is because I was hoping they would forget it was me that did that. And I was hoping they wouldn't tell anybody they went to Gold Creek. It seems like every Sunday I fail somebody as a pastor. And how do I know that? Because somebody will tell me every Sunday how I failed them. And then, I was even looking at this building. It's so cool. We see all the things that are successful now, but you maybe not know this, but all of this building, all this steel in this building was laying in the back, rusting in 2008. When our bank abandoned our project and we were stuck in the middle and the contractors were trying to foreclose on us, and I just felt like a failure. Now, I don't know what you have ever felt like. I don't know whether you're here today feeling your own failures, but I can tell you this, that the question has to be asked, can God help me succeed after my failures? I want you to look today with me at a story. We started last week. We talked about the passing of the baton of Moses to Joshua. Joshua becomes this great leader in Israel. He has a great victory in the town of Jericho. The walls fall down. But I don't want to talk to you about his successes. I want to talk to you about his first failure. What happened after he had his first big failure? You find the story in Joshua chapter 7, verse 1. Israel violated the instructions about the things set apart for the Lord. So this chapter starts, it's the beginning of the story of Joshua's biggest failure. And it starts with this saying, hey, these guys are having trouble following instructions. Which makes me ask the question, do you guys have that problem? Kind of like this, can you follow instructions? Or maybe you've been to IKEA and this is what the picture that you've got, and you say, I'm a big failure. I can't get these instructions. I know exactly what that's like. Well, here's what was happening. The people of Israel had some very clear instructions and they couldn't follow them. So how did it happen? Verse 1 goes on to say this. A man named Achan had stolen some things dedicated to the Lord. So the Lord was very angry with the Israelites. Now, this is a piece of information that would have been really helpful for them. Before their failure, if they'd have known that God was angry, they wouldn't have done what they did. They wouldn't have had this big failure, but they were clueless. I have a question. How many of you ever feel clueless, like you just wish you'd have known? In fact, there's a quote, you'd say, if I'd have only known, what would it be different if I'd have only known? Kind of like maybe some of you that thought Bitcoin was just like a thing, not a real thing. And now you wish you'd have known it was a real thing. Or maybe some of you say, if I'd only known about house prices, I wouldn't have bought that. I would have bought that $500,000 house that's now $1 million house. Or some of you have been to the lumber store and you said, if I'd have known the prices now, I would have built my deck 3 years ago. Or maybe some of you, when you think about your wedding and you're standing there with your bride or your husband, and you could say, if I only knew now, or knew then what I know now, if I'd only known. Or then there's the whole kid thing. You have a teenager now and you say, if I'd only known. I'd only known. The list goes on. You know, there's a lot of failure that happens because we don't know. If I'd only known. Now, what's interesting is Joshua chapter 7, verse 2 begins to tell, okay, God's angry. And verse 2, it starts to tell what the problem is. And I'm going to set the scene for verse 2. So as I set the scene, I want you to realize that they've just had a great big win. The walls of Jericho have fallen down. You remember Joshua is the new leader. He stopped the river, and they marched across on dry ground. They get on the other side, they pray together, they ask God for help. He says, march around 7 times, and the walls are fall down. They hardly had to do anything. It was such an easy win. They never even thought twice about asking God, should we go to the next battle? Instead, what we get is verse 2. Joshua sent some of his men from Jericho to spy out the town of Ai. So you can see this picture here. This is the town of Ai. They've actually found archaeologically, they found where this little town was. It kind of would show you what it's like. Well, I want you to understand these walls are huge, and it was full of giants and people, and the people of Israel got really overconfident. When God knocks the walls down, that's what happens. You get really, really overconfident. And the story goes on. It says this, they told Joshua, there's no need for all of us to go up there. It's not going to take more than 2,000 or 3,000 men to go and attack Ai. Which is kind of cool. I mean, when you think about it, when you've had success, you think you're going to be successful again. Success oftentimes is the biggest test we will ever have. When God gives you success, he's thinking about, what are you going to do with that success? Verse 4 tells what happened. So approximately 3,000 warriors were sent, but they were soundly, what's the word? Okay, we're going to try that again. They were soundly defeated. I'll say it another way. It wasn't even close. They lost. I have a question for you. What do you do when you lose and it isn't even close? You know, I've seen some people do. They'll pretend. They say, oh, you know, the sun was in our eyes. Oh, yeah, it was just a bad day. It was cloudy that day. The rain, it was the mud. Give all kinds of excuses and pretend it wasn't really a big failure when it was. Some people just ignore it, say, oh, yeah, we had that little thing. It happened a while ago. It's no big deal. And some people will own it. But here's the question. What are they going to do now that they've had this huge failure? It says they were soundly defeated. Here's what happens in verse 5. The Israelites were paralyzed with fear at the turn of the events, and their courage melted away. Here's what happened. They just lost all of their courage. That's what happened this week when some of you looked at your retirement accounts. Some of you are on the edge of retiring and you looked at it and you go, oh, I've got no way. Can God help you when you fail? That's the real question, because that's exactly what happened to Joshua. This brand new leader has great success. The walls of Jericho fall down. The river stops for him, and he sends a few thousand people up, and they're soundly defeated. And he is facing, for the very first time, a big F, failure. And he's paralyzed with fear. Does that describe you? What happened? I asked the question, I think he asked the question, what happened? Where's God? Where is his promises? Didn't he promise that he's going to give us all the promised land? Didn't he promise that all these people are that we're going to win these battles? What happened to all of his promises? Well, the story goes on. Joshua 6 says this, that Joshua and the elders threw dust on their head, bowed face down to the ground before the ark of the Lord until evening. Which, by the way, this is a great place to start. When you find yourself in the midst of failure, why not just fall on your face before God and say, God, why are you not helping us? What's going on here? What do I not know? Some of you are right now in the midst of a failure in their life and you have never done this before. You've never fallen on your face. This is a great place to start. Because if you don't do this, I want you to understand this. God can't help you if you don't ask him to. In fact, if they'd have started by asking God, should we go up to Ai? He would have said, I'm angry at you guys. There's somebody named Achan that's got a bunch of stuff that he shouldn't have. I just want you to take care of this before you go any further. And some of us, we go through our life and we only ask God when we're in a really bad spot. But every day of our life, if we will simply set aside the time to ask for his directions, he will direct your life. They forgot to ask. You know, a few months ago when we first started the conversation with Nick and Carissa, my wife and I had a number of Zoom calls with them. And we were on Zoom with them, and I still remember to this day, at the end of the Zoom call, I would look over at Audrey and I would say to Nick and Carissa, we want to pray for you. And Audrey and I would pray, and this is our prayer. We said, Lord, we want the best for them. We don't want anything less than the best for them. We just want them to be exactly where you want them to be. So Lord, if there's any reason that this is not where you want them, help us know that. And I love that. And then Nick would turn around and pray for you as a congregation. And he would say these words. He would say, God, we want the best for Gold Creek. If there's for some reason we're not supposed to do this, man, make that so clear. We just want the best for Gold Creek. That's how you ask for directions ahead of time. Well, the story goes on. Lord, Joshua says this. Why did you bring us across the Jordan River if you're going to just let the Amorites kill us? We all start there, right? We all start there. Why are you doing this to us? Because it's so much easier to blame God than to accept our own problem. That's what Joshua did, and that's what we do too. Usually when we face failure, we like to blame somebody. The story goes on. If we had only been content to stay on the other side, Lord, what can I say now that the Israelite has fled from his enemies? In other words, this is your problem. Why are you causing this? Why did you say this? What about? And they forgot. They forgot. God had just given them a big victory. The walls came down. The river split. This amazing thing happened. And now they're facing a little failure, and they don't know what to do. Verse 9. For when all the other people living around the land hear about it, they're going to surround us and wipe us out. You know, this guy's having a bad day. That's what it is. Some of you have had bad days like that. Why, God? Why are you doing this to me? Now, I love what God does because this is so good. Joshua has just laid out his case. Why, God? This is your problem. Why have you done this? We just don't understand. Why? Here's what God does. He never answers the question why. Verse 13, here's what he says to them. Get up, command the people to purify themselves in preparation for tomorrow. In other words, he never answers the question why, and I want to suggest to you that God doesn't really answer the question why in most cases. But he always answers the question what. What does he want you to do? And in that case, he says to Joshua, he says, get up. Go get ready. I'm going to do something tomorrow. Get up and go. And verse 13, he goes on and says, for this is what the Lord, the God of Israel said, hidden among you are things set apart for the Lord. See, what happened was this guy named Achan, when he went into the city of Jericho, looked and he saw a pile of coins, some silver, some gold, and some clothing, and he said, man, that looks good. I'd really like to take that. And that's exactly what he did. He took that pile of coins and he buried it in his tent. Verse 13, God goes on to say this: you will never defeat your enemies until you remove these things from among you. In other words, he's saying this: you've stolen from me. Which brings me to this point. You can't ever get help from God. God can't help you when you steal from him. I want you to understand this a little bit, because some people don't understand what this means. So you see, Jericho was the first battle that Joshua was leading, and God said to Joshua, he says, hey, listen, this time you guys aren't even gonna have to fight. Just march around the city 7 times, and on the 7th time, there's a wall. You're gonna go 7 times around on that 7th day, and then the walls are gonna fall down, and you don't even have to fight. Just march in, and I'm gonna give you this victory. But he said this: everything in there is holy. Why? You know what the 7th day was? If you do the 10 Commandments, what do you know? The 10 Commandments says what? There's one day that's holy. The 7th day is holy. You don't do anything on the 7th day, which is exactly what happened. They marched around the city, but they didn't have a great battle on the Sabbath. The reason is because God did the fighting for them, and what he was saying to them is, this one's mine. Don't touch any of this stuff. But Achan, this one guy, couldn't help himself. He took the stuff. Now I want to tell you about these coins. These are mine. My wife and I sent Audrey down. We got $50 worth of 50-cent pieces. I've always had 50-cent pieces in my office. Let me tell you why. When you have little grandkids and they have to travel a couple of hours to come visit you. So when my son's kids were small and they would have to travel a couple of hours to come visit me, you know what they would do? You know what I would do? I would give them each a 50-cent piece. They'd walk into the room and I'd say, hey, listen, I want you to come visit me. You're so valuable to me. I'm giving you this coin to remind you it's worth a couple hours in the car to come visit Grandpa. You're valuable to me. And every time they came visit me, I'd give them these coins. And they got used to that. It was so cool. You know, I'd give them these coins. And I'm going to tell you, I have some little grandkids right now that a couple of times, I'm sure they're going to have to travel a while to get to where I'm going to be at the time. And when they come, I'm going to give them these coins. But this one thing happened one day. I gave the kids the coins, and I just told them how valuable they were, how much I cared for them, how much I love them. And we sat around in the office and we shared a little bit. And I left, and there's this bowl of coins in the office. You know what happens when you leave a kid with a bowl of coins in the office? You know what I'm going to talk about, right? This one grandkid stayed back, and I noticed. And I saw this grandkid looking longingly at this bowl of coins. And I gave a little warning. Man, I love you with all my heart. And I'm going to be generous with you. But if you take these coins from me, there's going to be a problem. Because when you steal from me, I'm not helping you anymore. You understand? There's such a powerful thought here. Here's what God is saying. I have so much I want to give you guys, but don't steal from me. So the story goes on. Verse 16. Early the next morning, Joshua brought the tribes of Israel before the Lord, and the tribe of Judah was singled out. Let me translate this a little bit. Achan, this guy who stole the coins, went back and buried it in the back of his tent. And all of his family knew it was there because it was in his tent. And so on this morning, the day after the big defeat, they all get together. 3 million of people get together. 3 million people get together, and they say, somebody here has buried something in their tent, and we're going to find you out. So the 3 million get together, and they're divided into 12 camps. And Achan thinks, my odds are 3 million to 1. They're not going to find me out. Chance number one. What would have happened that day if Joshua would have said, hey, listen, you guys, I'm the guy. I'm the reason there's a problem. I'm the one that they're talking about. I buried this in my tent. But he didn't do that. He went with his odds. And sure enough, they picked one of the 12, which is the tribe of Judah, and they said, okay, this one is. And then they took the tribe of Judah and they gave him essentially a second chance. So think of it this way. It's about 500,000 to 1. Now it's down to about 500,000. He's saying, I still got a good chance that they're not going to find me out. He doesn't step forward. And then his clan gets picked, the clan of Zerah. The story goes on in verse 18, or verse 17, it goes on. It says, then the families of Zerah came forward, and the family of Zimri was singled out. Now this is down, it's gone all the way down to 50 to 1. This family of Zimri probably had about 50 in there, and here's Achan, one of those 50, and he knows what's buried. And finally, every member of Zimri's family was brought person by person, and Achan was singled out. This is so crazy, but it's so true. When you're caught, it's very different than when you confess. You see, Achan was given all kinds of chances to come to that point of confession, and now all of a sudden, he's caught. Let me remind you of this third point I want to make here, that God can't help you if you don't own your stuff. How many chances has God given you? You know, the first step to change is the moment that you make a decision to own your stuff, to voluntarily confess your own failures. There's so much freedom in confession. There's freedom when you know your failures are out there. Well, verse 20 tells the rest of the story. Achan replied. I love his reply. He finally gets to him. They pull him out of the crowd. He goes, okay, I did it. It's true. I've sinned against the Lord, the God of Israel. Poor Achan. You know what they did for Achan? They took him and they took his tent and they took all of the stuff that he'd stolen from God, and they took him out to a valley, and they titled the Valley of Trouble, because on that day they had a bonfire and they burned him up. You know why they did that? Because his failure that was unconfessed has cost the lives of so many men on the road. I ask the question of you. Are you willing to own your stuff? The Lord then said to Joshua, verse 8, or chapter 8, verse 1. The Lord then said to Joshua, don't be afraid or discouraged. I love this verse because remember, their courage had melted away. They thought there was no hope for the future, but he says, no, listen, don't be afraid or discouraged. Attack Ai, for I have given the king of Ai and his people in this town and the land. Here's the key to success. God really has a good plan for you. If you just ask him, he'll direct you. But you can't have stuff hidden in your tent. This time, he says, you may keep the plunder and the livestock for yourself. I love this thought. You know, I'm going to give all these coins away, but I never want someone to steal them from me. I want to suggest to you today that God can help us find success after failure. How do you do that? When you own it, you can let God teach you something through your failure. Just to ask him. If you ask him, here's what you're gonna find, that God actually has a plan for you. You see, God can help you find his plan. How do you find that? I'm gonna ask you to do something right now. Will you just bow your heads just for a minute? I just want you to think about this today. Have you owned your failures? If today you've been asking why and you've been thinking about your life and you're dealing with some failures and you've kind of pretended that they're not there, just own it today. Just say, God, man, I have some failures I need to give you. There's another thought here today. Have you asked him for direction? I'm asking you to ask God right now. You've given him your failures. Now just say, God, you know my failures. You know where they are. You know what's happening. I just give my failures to you. Give me direction now. One last question. Is there anything buried in the back of your tent? Stuff that's valuable to you, that you've been hanging on to? Some of you have relationships that you buried back there that you don't want anyone else to know about. You gotta dig them up. You can't let any person get in between you and God. Some of you have made your kids too valuable. You forgot to lead them spiritually. And some of us have just made money the center of our life. We're so afraid. Just kind of buried it all in the back of our tent. It's your turn. Give it to God. Here's your prayer. Just say this in your heart right now. Lord Jesus, I give you my failures. I give you my buried stuff. And I ask you to lead my life. In Jesus' name, amen. Now would you look at me? You know the cool thing about our church, whether you're watching online or whether you're in person, we share with each other. And if you're making spiritual decisions, man, talk to me. Let one of our staff know that God's speaking to you. And make sure that you share your decision. We want to help you along the way. And so I encourage you to do that. Now I know some of you are going to say, wow, the pastor's kind of short today. He's actually letting out close to on time. Well, no. I actually want to take about 4 or 5 minutes and ask you to consider joining us. I actually made a little bit of time in the schedule for us to say, hey, we really want you to consider joining us. It's as close to membership moment as we have. Would you just humor me right now? Would you pull out the God Can card that's on your chair? And I want to take a minute and talk to you about it. And in order to do that, I think you guys know I'm not alone anymore. This is that Pastor Nick and I are running together. And so I'm going to ask Pastor Nick to come up and help me with this. What Pastor Nick and I are asking you today is for you to consider joining, being a part of Gold Creek. Some people say, what's our membership? What does it mean to be a member? This is about as close to membership as we have, which is just saying, hey, would you participate? Pastor Nick's going to help me with this today. And so I'm going to start with just a simple equation. Some people say, how big's Gold Creek? And remember, there's half the crowd watches online in Mill Creek, and half watches in person or comes in person. So those that are watching online, this is for you as well. So there's about 2,400 families that call Gold Creek home.
That's right.
Now, we did some figuring, and I'll let you talk about that right now with our budget.
Yeah. In our budget, as we look at our God Can series and we reflect on this every year as a church, here's what we came up with. It takes about $30 a week per family just to keep everything running, to serve coffee, to have the lights on. That doesn't move our church forward. That doesn't take us forward with where God's calling us to go. Just allows us to maintain the status quo. So about $30 a week.
$30 a week per family is about what it costs. Now, here's how we did that. If you're wondering how we did that, we took 2,400 families, divided it into our budget, my 52, and came up with $30 a week. It used to be, Pastor Nick, it used to be 25. Now, I know some of you are freaked out. It is inflation. That's when we did the thing, we realized, okay, that's actually what it costs. 2,400 families divided. Now, I want to share you another number with you. Of those 2,400 families, 824 families actually give something to help take care of the expenses. That's really cool. If you're one of the givers, man, way to go. Thank you. And if you're not, we love that you've come here, that you participate. We love to help you. We love to serve you. And this is as close to saying, hey, would you join those who are giving now? And here's where you start. There's a good place to start is $30 a week. Now, there's another number that's kind of important there, right?
Yeah. Of the approximately 662 families, about 166 of our families tithe. And this would be folks that would say, hey, we want to commit to trusting God with our income, and we're going to commit 10% of our income to Gold Creek Community Church. And really, those families, if you're one of those, man, we're so grateful for that. Those families help us move us forward as a church. They help us move forward with our mission.
You know, 10% is one of those things that is such a crazy number, and people that have never gone to church or participated, why would you even consider giving 10%? That's such an interesting question. We've been talking about that.
We've been talking about that. And, is 10% about money? Yeah, it's about money. It's really about a condition of our heart. It's an invitation, I think, that Jesus extends to us as an invitation to say, do you want to trust me fully?
In our finances. When did you learn to do that, Nick? I know when I did, growing up as a kid, I learned it in Sunday school.
Did you? Yeah, same for me. I remember when I was 5 years old, I can still remember getting $1 a week, and I would put a dime in our offering envelope.
Yeah, I wish we could just do $1 a week for kids.
That'd be nice.
Right? Yeah, but that was something ingrained in you, and that 10%, there's a time when you get like your first check on your own, and it's your own decision. That's a spiritual decision, isn't it? It's a really cool moment.
It is.
One of the things that we do, just to let you know, if you say, hey, I want to trust God with this, I want to try this, we do a tithe test where we just say, hey, listen, just trust him with it. We'll put it in the savings. We won't touch your money. You test God with that for 90 days.
Yep.
And if for any reason you want that money back, no questions asked, we just give it back to you. And it's so cool because it allows people to say, I want to make that spiritual decision.
That's right.
Interesting thing, the 166 that give actually supply enough money for all those others of that 2,400 families.
Yeah.
All those people that come as our guests are really supported through tithers. That's really what it amounts to. Yeah. So I just say to you, thank you for those that do that, but also for those that are ready to make that spiritual decision. It's a cool place for you to do that. Yeah. So let's talk more about that. There's another thing that we do in God Can. We ask people to start giving wherever they are. But there's another thought, and that is that we try and do something that moves us forward, a big vision thing. And I asked you the other day, what's your vision? What's your heart, Nick? Where are you going? Where are we going as a church?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dan. A lot of people have been asking me that question. Stakeholders here at the church, the staff, hey, what's the vision? As I said last weekend, if you were here last weekend, my vision for Gold Creek is really to continue to engage people who are far from God, make this a place where people can check that out. I do think one area that I think we can see God take us to the next level would be in the area of our family ministry, especially in our student ministry. When I moved back to the area even a month ago, I was checking out the region and just realized how much this area has grown, even with high schools. And there's 4 big high schools within just a few mile radius here at Gold Creek. And this might sound crazy. Here's what I think. I think Gold Creek should have the premier youth ministry in the state of Washington. I really believe that. I think for where God's positioned us, and we clap for that.
I think that's worth clapping for,
I think that's something we're just believing God to do.
And what I love about Nick's vision and dream on this is that it's doable. And I listened to him talk about the strategize how to do that, and I get excited about it. I believe that's exactly gonna happen. What do we need to accomplish that, Nick? Help us see that.
Yeah, 2 things, really simply as I look around. One is infrastructure. Something as simple as our student center doesn't have AC. And on a day like today, by the way, if you're online, we know what you're doing. You're not here because you're enjoying the sun.
You probably do have AC.
Yeah. So, but our student center doesn't have air conditioning, and that's gonna be tricky for us in the summer. So we want to make sure we have a comfortable environment. A few of our little kids' classrooms, they need to have AC too. So physical infrastructure is one, and the second one is team. Is we want to invest. Here's what I know, what we all know probably, is some of the best youth ministries and the best student ministries have great teams and they have great resources. And so we want to invest in that.
So we're going to beef up our team and we're going to improve our infrastructure.
That's
so
right.
We've set as a goal, we said, hey, $300,000 would really move us a long way along that. And my challenge is for you, if you would consider a one-time gift through this series, at some point and say, hey, I'd like to help with that. And Pastor Nick, when Audrey and I were talking about this, we believe in your vision. We believe in what God wants. And my wife and I, we said, we want to be a part of that. So we're setting aside, we're giving, in fact, today we're going to give it. We know what we're going to do. We're going to give $25,000 toward that, that vision of yours. And
awesome.
I'm not alone in this. It's cool. A friend of mine I was talking to about it, and I was telling him what I was going to do. He says, I'll match that. Wow. So we're going to start with $50,000 before anyone gives anything. We're going to start with that toward that vision. And I'm believing for a premier youth department. Yeah. So I'm excited about that. So let's talk practically for our church. There's a God Can card. You have it in your hand. Explain this card.
Yeah.
You're
card
better
looks
at
just
this
like
than I am.
this. Here's how we're going to do God Can this year. Is on Sunday, June 12th. We're calling it God Can Sunday. We have a bunch of fun stuff planned. You don't want to miss it. We have fun stuff planned at every level for kids and students, but June 12th is God Can Sunday. If you've come and you've been coming to Gold Creek for a while, you already know how this works. If you're prepared to give today, man, you can do that. You can drop your gift in one of the God Can buckets in the front. Here's what Krista and I are doing. We're gonna take this card home and we're gonna put it on our fridge. We're gonna tape one to our bathroom mirror, and we're just gonna pray about it. We're just gonna say, God, where are you leading us in this moment? We wanna be really open. Of course, we wanna invest in Gold Creek in a significant way in this season. And so, here's what we're asking you to do. On the card, you can take it out, and it has a spot for you. Step 1 is to fill out your info. You can fill out your name and your email address as legibly as you can. And you can indicate on there if you wanna do a one-time gift. If you want to do a recurring gift, you can do that as part of God Can. It can be over the next 6 or 12 months. Or maybe there's some of us who might feel God drawing us towards that commitment to tithe. So that's step 1. Step 2, you can scan this QR code.
Let me talk about that for a minute, if you wouldn't mind. So, some of you today, we know gas prices, everything's crazy. We know that.
Yeah.
And so some of you today, even as we're talking about money, you're just tensing up. Just relax. Relax. You can trust God with your finances. Amen. Trust Him with it. And we're not asking you to do something you don't want to do. Only do something that you want to do. But if you're saying, where do I start? Start at $30. Just start there. Or if you're a person that's tithing, start there. If you're not ready to do the one-time gift, that's okay. Yeah. Start somewhere. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm asking you to do, is just start somewhere in that process, and that's what we're asking you to fill out.
That's right.
Now, what's the QR code?
QR code is just to set all that up. So you can scan this card, and you can set up your gift online. You can do all that. But we do want you to bring your card back. We want you to bring this back on the 12th. We'll have cards out in between then. And we're going to just commit as a church. Man,
So
we're going to see what God does.
I was going to talk about that just
Okay.
for a second. We can't read your writing. Some of you are as bad as I am at writing. So we know that whatever you write on this card probably not going to mean anything. So there's a place for you when you go to the digital thing. That's where you set up your giving and you fill it out and we'll be able to read it. So this is more something that we're going to just celebrate on the 12th. We're going to all do this. Even though I've told you what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a card in on the 12th and do that, which is, we're going to watch God do this. We're going to drop this in the God camp.
Yeah.
And that 12th is going to be a great day, isn't it? We have some really cool things planned for that day.
Yeah, for sure.
You got to
miss
be
it.
there. So again, thank you for letting us talk to you about that. And let me remind you that at the end of the service, if you're new, you can come and chat with Nick and I over at the newcomers in the student center that doesn't have air conditioning.
That's right.
So come join us. We'd love to have you. We'd love to meet with you. Would you stand? I'm going to ask you to pray for these guys before they get out of here. I'm so glad you came. Thanks for letting us talk to you about joining our mission.
Yeah. Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, God, we are so grateful. Just like Pastor Dan shared today, God, we're grateful that you're able to mine out the areas of our life and the areas of our heart where we might be keeping you at an arm's length. God, we do pause just to say thank you for that invitation. God, I'm really grateful on a day like today for our partners here at Gold Creek Community Church, God, who are on mission with you, who want to see people who are not connected connect in, find hope, find direction. And God, we would just ask, we just give you this initiative, we give you this season and say, God, we want to see you work in it in a significant way. We trust you with that. Pray all this in the good name of your son, Jesus. Amen. Well,
We'll see you next week, man. We're glad you're here.